Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We are excited that everyone is here for the STOP Project Maple Letter to the Editor workshop. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes, so we can just let some more folks in. But welcome again. And if folks want to start sharing in the chat, your name, your pronouns, where you live, and where you get your news from. And also just make sure we're going to be speaking for a little bit, so just to make sure to mute yourself, that would be very helpful. But yeah, please share in the chat your name, pronouns, and where you live, and where you get your news from. And we'll start in about like a minute. Thank you, Lourdes from Central Valley, New York. Getting the news from Substack, Washington Post, New York Times, MSNBC. Amazing. Hi, Dennis from Holden, Mass. Social newspaper. Thank you. Margaret from New Pulse. News from the aggregators. Amazing. Linda, hello from Ohio. Hello from Ohio. Welcome. Um, News from PBS, Fareed Zakaria, MSNBC, The Atlantic, Jane, Long Island, Represent. Again, amazing news resources there. Hi, Melanie, David, and Jen from Massachusetts as well. Oh, we got Casey from Philly, Laurel from Connecticut. Hello, Julie from Iowa. I'm also from Iowa. Where are you from, Julie? I'm from Waterloo. But welcome, Julie. Um, Hi, Lori. Hi, Sue. Hi, Martha. Hi, Holly. This is a great amount of folks. Um, so keep dropping into the chat. I'm gonna throw it down one more time for folks who are just joining us, but we're gonna get started. So I think that Senna can start sharing the screen. And welcome everyone. So we're so excited to have everyone here for our STOP Project Maple Letter to the Editor writing workshop. My name is Nisha Swinton. I work for Food and Water Watch. Thank you all for joining us. We're excited to have you. And just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. We are recording this meeting, so we'll email the recording out to all of you afterwards, as well as everyone who signed up. Please keep in mind, please mute yourself. This will help keep background noise down. You can also turn on closed caption if you like in Zoom. Use the chat box, which I love that everybody's using right now, to share your thoughts and ask any questions. And also, we'll have time in a little bit for more questions that we can address, hopefully. So during this call, we will discuss how media outreach, like letters to the editor, help us build support for opposition to the proposed Project Maple. So again, with the introductions in the next slide. In the chat, everyone, please share your name, pronouns, where you live, and where do you get your news. And again, I'm Nisha with Food and Water Watch, pronouns she, her. I live in Brooklyn, New York, via Iowa, Waterloo, Iowa, and also up in Maine. Those are the places that I lived in. I get my news from like everywhere. So I'm seeing a lot of like Washington Post, MSNBC. I get Democracy Now! News. I also go into the kind of right-wing news so I can hear where kind of the opposition is coming from. So that's me. And we will go like straight into the agenda for today. So the next slide. So thank you everyone for the introductions. We're going to give like a brief update on Project Maple, and then we'll go through best practices and of how to write a letter to the editor. And then we're going to start right in. We're going to start drafting one. And then we'll have some time for questions. And then I'll wrap up and like next steps. So I'm just going to dive right in, and I'm going to pass it to Senna from Sierra Club in Connecticut to give us a brief overview of Project Maple with some updates.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Nisha, for starting us off. Really nice to see all of you on the call. My name is Senna. I use she, her pronouns. And I am an intern with Sierra Club Connecticut and have been working on the Stop Project Maple campaign for about the last year and a half that we've known it's happening. So I'm going to give you like a really brief 5-minute overview of the campaign, and then happy to chat more either later in the call or at another time about the project if there are further questions. But basically, Stop Project Maple is a campaign that came together after Enbridge announced a pipeline expansion proposal that would come online, which basically means it would start operating in 2029. And so Enbridge is a really large fossil fuel company. They have pipelines all across the United States, and I believe also Canada. And this specific pipeline proposal or expansion project would significantly expand an existing pipeline that's about 1,100 miles long. And it goes from like the New York, New Jersey border through Connecticut, Rhode Island, and into Massachusetts. And if it was expanded to its full capacity and Enbridge gets all of the buyers they want, the expansion would add about 14.5 million metric tons of CO2 emissions per year. And for context, Connecticut produced, I believe, about like 32, I want to say, million metric tons of CO2 emissions in 2021. So this is like a really, really significant expansion that we're talking about. And for some additional context on why we are opposing this natural gas pipeline, quote unquote, natural gas is primarily made up of methane. And methane is a really potent and powerful greenhouse gas. It's about 80 times more powerful than CO2 over a 20-year time period, which means that its impact on global warming, especially over these like 20-year kind of time periods and are really, really powerful and really impactful. And so doing everything we can to reduce our natural gas and methane usage and end it is really critical and important. So with that, dropping a little bit more into the campaign, in addition to opposing this kind of main pipeline proposal, we're also opposing a bunch of additional pipeline segments that Enbridge is proposing and claiming is like unrelated to Project Maple. But we are kind of pushing back on that statement because why are they all of a sudden expanding all of these pieces of infrastructure throughout all of the states that are impacted by Project Maple? So as part of that work, one example of a piece of infrastructure that we're opposing is the compressor stations in Brookfield, Connecticut. And so compressor stations switch, or these compressor stations in particular, switch gas between multiple pipelines. They're really dangerous to the health and well-being of the community because they're also releasing methane directly from the pipeline into that community. And these ones in particular are located about 1,900 feet from the town's middle school, so kind of particularly concerning. In addition to that, Chaplin and Coventry, Connecticut have both had infrastructure updates recently. Massachusetts had some of these kind of segmented pieces as well. And Rhode Island also had one of these, and they were replacing a pipeline under a river, and they spilled drilling fluid, even just doing that replacement. So we are already seeing the kind of harm that these infrastructure updates are having. So as a campaign, we have been working really hard to oppose this expansion and to kind of call out how harmful this is to our communities, our states, our health and well-being, as well as to climate change. And so over the past about year and a half that we've known about the project, we have hosted rallies and protests and educational events. These have happened throughout all of the kind of mentioned states that are being impacted. We also deliver letters to the governors in each impacted state. And then kind of bringing us to today's topic, we've been writing op-eds and letters to the editor as a means of getting this information out more widely to folks in, if you don't mind just staying on mute, that would be great, to folks in impacted states.
We lost the slides, Sana. Yep.
Sorry, are they back? Or should I stop sharing it?
I'm still seeing the slides.
We see slides.
We see slides.
Okay, amazing. All right. Okay, so yes, writing op-eds and letters to the editor, an important way for us to kind of continue getting information out to folks. If you want more information about our work, our past work, current work, kind of what we're thinking about, as well as like a recording of the last webinar we did, there's more information on our website, which is stopprojectmaple.org. We'll also share all of those resources in a follow-up email to this, and happy to chat more also at a future point if there are questions. But with that, I will go ahead and pass it back to Nisha to start talking us through letters to the editor specifically.
All right, so we're all here because we do not want this project to happen. And one way to like really get our voices out there is to contact the media, get our community to hear more about this really egregious thing. So I'm just going to go through a short little workshop training about what is an LTE, a letter to the editor. Why do we do these? And then we're going to go into best practices and then get to drafting. So the next slide is, so what is a letter to the editor? We, again, are excited that everyone is here and just want to like emphasize that letter to the editors are super important. So a letter to the editor basically is a written response to an article in a newspaper that expresses agreement or disagreement to an issue of concern to the audience in that said newspaper. So an LTE section is one of the most widely read sections and is important for educating and persuading editors, the public, and then decision makers, our elected officials. There is even someone in every congressional office or every like state legislature office or governor's office whose job it is, their job is to comb through all of the local newspapers to see if there's a letter to the editor about that person. So decision makers see these letters, which is really highly amazing and effective. So the next slide is like why letters matter, right? So it brings attention to the issue. It puts pressure on decision makers by exposing them to the public. It makes viewpoints known. It makes your viewpoint about not loving this idea of Project Maple, it makes it known. It's also like community voices are heard and it builds community. It gets your name out there and it builds community for people to be like, oh, I want to chat with this person about this issue. Even if an LTE doesn't get published, you're still pinging this to the reporter and the paper about the issue. And if you do publish, obviously, that will be a huge for informing the audience and any legislator about this specific topic. So basically, it's a way to specifically talk to our elected officials because they're going to get pinged on it. So we do call-in days, we do meetings. This is just another way for us to ping our elected officials about the issues that we care about, specifically not having Project Maple happen. So basically, when you want to start writing the letter to the editor, it's pretty basic process that you can follow. So number one, find an article that you can use to tie in. So when you can respond to, once you do that, it'll help inform you on how to start that letter. So any article about climate change or article about solar or something like that, you just want to tie in to the idea of Project Maple and how this is not necessary for us in a climate future that we envision. So your letter will have a greater chance of being printed if it is in response to an editorial, op-ed, or front page story. Begin your letter by citing the original story that you just read about by the name, date, and the author. Some papers do occasionally print LTEs noting a lack of coverage on a specific issue. So that's a really positive thing for us when a lot of papers don't want to print stuff that we want them to print. If this topic you are writing about, so begin by stating your concern that the paper hasn't focused on this important issue, if that's the case. So that also flags the paper to be like, oh, we haven't written about this issue. We need to do that. Secondly, you should always find the paper's submission guidelines because even though they're often the same, they do vary specifically on word count. So always find how many words you can throw into an LTE. If you can't find that information you need, simply call the paper and ask how to go about submitting a letter in response to a recently published article. Many papers have a word count limit from around like 100 to 200 words. Try to aim for less rather than more. Another third point, think about the single most important thing you want readers to understand after reading your LTE, and focus on that. This will help make your message really clear, cut down on words, and usually make a more punchy, straightforward read for your audience. Remember, you are talking to decision makers and the public, so you want to make this as clear as possible. And then also lastly, frame your call to action. Try to always include a sentence calling on someone to do something, whether it's public needing to show up for a board meeting to oppose Project Maple or to sign a petition, or that you want your elected official to support opposing Project Maple. And then, yeah, these are some examples of articles you could write into. So this is like a clear example of Connecticut leader calls for fighting climate change following a string of dangerous storms. Dangerous storms, climate change, yes. Project Maple, gonna increase climate change. Not a good thing. So this is an example of an LTE that we could write into, as well as like the other one about Governor Hochul having like a bunch of like state officials to oppose Project Maple. And then, yeah, this is when you go to your publication, this is how you submit. This is a basic like submission form just to like let y'all know what it looks like. Um, so I'm gonna get into some writing tips. So in general, brevity is one of the most important things in an LTE. I suck at brevity. I need to get better at it. But this is very important. You should focus on one or two key points and not deviate very much from those one or 2 points. Be concise. It will give your letter more focus and improve your chances of getting published, right? You should also keep it local. Virtually all newspapers put preferences over publishing letters that are directly relevant to their readers. So if you're talking about a national issue, if you can frame it locally. So if you're talking about Project Maple, that is obviously a bunch of states, frame it locally, and that'll give you more of like a leg up to get published. Also, letters to the editors are not online comments. The best letters have a calm, thoughtful tone. Not only will keeping your response like civil and measured increase the chances of getting your letter published, but it is also a way to sound more convincing. Lastly, use punchy language. Don't be drab. Get the thesaurus out on your phone or whatever. Lean into the drama, but not into the online comment drama, if that makes sense. So always play up rather than down. So in general, carefully support your opinions. We really want to make sure that we do this. Carefully support your opinions with evidence. Numbers, statistics, and cited facts will make your argument more persuasive. Just be careful not to overuse them or get too much in the weeds, as they can get confusing and like a little bit jargony. Your letter also should stand on its own. Even if you're responding to another article or letter, don't assume readers have read them. Provide necessary background information as briefly and simply as possible. Also, in general, we all know this, edit and proofread before submitting. Ask Senna or myself to edit for any kind of like factual accuracy, grammar, newsworthiness. We are here to help you. Also, don't use jargon as much as you can. Use technical terms. Don't use abbreviations. And then regulations, like a lot of the jargon can confuse readers. So try not to use that as much as possible. Also, just lastly, give them a reason, the publication a reason to trust your thoughts and opinions. It's fine to give out your credentials, the state that you live in, who you are, and why your opinion on this subject matters. For example, you could say like, as a volunteer for the local NAACP chapter, or I'm a Food and Water Watch or Sierra Club volunteer, or from my work as a professor of economics. Even being a voter in a relevant district can count as a credential. So keep that in mind and put that into your LTE. Just try to establish like yourself as credible and trustworthy, which we know y'all are. And then the next, just closing out. So again, always include a strong statement. Leave readers with a clear understanding of your message by reiterating your main point at the end of the letter. So stop Project Maple. We want this elected official to vote against Project Maple. Specifically, we're targeting governors. So we want Governor Lamont to oppose Project Maple or whatever state you're in. Don't forget to include, like I just said before, your contact information. Put your name, your title, and location at the bottom of your letter. Also, give the opinion department, the LTE department or op-ed department, a call a day or two after you submit. You can follow up with them and ask if they've received the letter, if they're planning to publish it. If they say no, it's always useful to ask why. Why? Make sure to just present that question as a curiosity and not as a defensive or hostile accusation, just a curiosity. You can also submit positive LTEs too. Don't hesitate to write an LTE praising a story that gets your issue right? You can reiterate why the Project Maple issue, if some publication got it right, you can reiterate why it's important to the community and give another perspective. Also, only submit the same letter one time. I know this kind of stinks, but only submit the same letter one time. Don't allow others to copy and submit your LTE verbatim, even to a different outlet. That can be a serious copyright issue. So template LTEs can backfire. Editors will blacklist your organizations or your name if they think you're doing that. Instead, try to present a unique voice and be yourself, even if you're doing it on behalf of an organization or this campaign. Lastly, if you get published, be sure to amplify the power of your voice and social media. Like, amazing. Let Sana and myself know. We will get it out there, email it to your listservs, and share it word of mouth. So the next slide, yeah. So this is just like a reminder slide of some of the key points. I think another just really important key point is remember to be quote conscious. So when you're writing, think about each sentence as a moment to pull a perfect quote out. You want to make sure each sentence matters and packs a punch that would stand out to an editor, someone from the media, or one of our elected officials that we're trying to get to oppose Project Maple. With all of that, I'm going to send it back over to Senna, who's going to show us an example of a beautiful LTE.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Nisha. Yeah, so with all of that context and everything that Nisha shared, we just want to give you guys an example of what this might look like. So Sydney Collins, who's on the call, wrote this letter to the editor in response to an article that was published in the Hartford Courant following Governor Lamont in Connecticut when he gave his State of the State address in January. He was supportive of natural gas. And so in response to that, there is this letter to the editor. And just to kind of point out, I think a few of the things that Sydney did, that Nisha also mentioned earlier, she states the title of this article right at the beginning. Then later on, you can see that Sydney pulls in kind of one particular fact here and uses the statistics from it. So she mentions the the Global Warming Solutions Act and how it sets greenhouse gas reduction goals for Connecticut. And how Project Maple doesn't really make sense in that context for our state, and I would also add for the other states that it runs through. And then she also kind of ties in her personal perspective as a young person in Connecticut and how that really kind of ties back to her concern around Project Maple and around the statements that Lamont made and also how this article addressed them. And then finally, she closes with this call to action, kind of calling on Lamont to step up and to stop investing in harmful natural gas and to instead invest in energy efficiency and in renewable energy. I know that it's a little hard to read a ton of words on a presentation during a Zoom, so we will share the slides afterwards and you all can take a closer look at this. But just, yeah, wanted to provide a quick example. All right, so with that, we are actually going to take a couple of minutes to do questions. After this, we are going to talk a little bit. We're going to share like a letter to the editor guide that Nisha and I have put together specifically for Project Maple. That includes a lot of talking points that you can use in a letter to the editor. We're also going to take a few minutes to look for recent articles. So if you have questions now, really kind of specifically about the structure of letters to the editor, or how you create them, that would be great. And I think if folks want to drop them in the chat, I'm also going to stop sharing so I can see people. If you want to raise your hand, you're welcome to. Otherwise, we can go ahead and then that will leave us more time at the end to do questions then, if they come up later on. Yeah, Pedro.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. I was just wondering, can the letter come out of the blue, or do you have to be responding to a specific article in the paper?
So you have to be responding to a specific article in the paper. So right after this, we will take a moment to look through that, but having letters be timely and having an article that was published recently and be in response to that is super helpful. And then like Nisha mentioned, it sounds like, and I didn't actually realize that this is something you could do, but it sounds like there's also, if like a newspaper is not covering, let's say Project Maple, writing to them and saying, hey, I'm noticing a lack of coverage could also be an opportunity. Dennis?
I have one last question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
If I email my LTE, can I
Mhm.
copy my congressman as a copy? In other words, to the paper at copy congressman whatever. Can I do that?
I think so. It depends on the publication you're submitting to. A lot of times the publications have like a form that you fill out. So you couldn't copy them on that, but certainly if it gets published, I think following up and like sending it to your congressperson is great. I mean, I would also say, I think you could, yeah, I don't know. Nisha, I don't know. Do you have additional comments? If it doesn't
Yeah,
get published,
no.
I would also email them.
Pedro, I love that. I think that you could, I mean, obviously submit your LTE within the platform of whatever newspaper you're submitting into. And I would also, I love the idea of separately emailing your elected official, saying like, hey, I submitted this LTE, and here it is.
Okay, thank you.
Amazing. All right, Dennis, and then we'll go ahead and jump back in.
Yeah, hi, this is Dennis. I'm in Massachusetts, and Eversource increased natural gas rates really significantly in November, and it's plus 25%, and it's getting huge amount of mind share in the state of Mass, to the extent that the governor has gone back to the DPU and asked them to reconsider rates, even though I'm sure she saw them ahead of time. My question is given that a lot of people's minds now are focused on Eversource natural gas and how much it's costing me, how do I get some mind share associated with Project Maple in an LTE? That is, Project Maple is obviously very important, but if I'm reading it and I'm enraged about my natural gas bill, my methane gas bill today, how do I get people's mind share off of just the rates themselves and focus on Project Maple? Thank you.
Yeah, so we're dealing with a similar situation in Connecticut where our rates have been increasing really consistently for a long amount of time. And there's a ton of like political drama around that. And people are also really suffering because they're incredibly expensive. So I think to Nick's point in the chat, Project Maple would be paid for by ratepayers, so it would increase prices. In addition, there is information out there about how natural gas prices fluctuate. And for example, like once like offshore wind is on the grid, it is less expensive than natural gas. And I know that Sierra Club did like a study on that last year, and there's that information out there, and I'm happy to share that with you. But I think instead of like, if this is a conversation that is being had, Project Maple is tied to it. And so there are opportunities to tie the two together, and like, let's say, respond to an article about natural gas and natural gas prices with information about Project Maple. And also Eversource in Massachusetts stated that they wanted to buy natural gas for Project Maple, so there's kind of another connection there. Yeah, you should do.
Thank
All
you.
right, amazing. Yeah, of course. Unless there's anything else really pressing, I think we'll go ahead and jump back in, and then we're also going to go into breakout rooms, so there will be plenty of time to chat. All right, I'm gonna reshare my screen. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the letters to the editor. So in the next 15 minutes, we're gonna get started on writing letters. Our hope is that you're walking out of this workshop with an outline of your letter. But we also have limited time. So it will be kind of just some stuff to get you all started, and then hopefully it will be pretty straightforward from there. But our goal in the next 15-20 minutes is to really do a couple of things. So the first is to find an article in your local newspaper that you can respond to. It could be something about climate, environment, something that mentions your governor's name, something about natural gas and rate prices. I think those are all kind of great things to look for. So it could also be about clean energy or fossil fuel infrastructure. Once you find something, if you want to go ahead and share it in the chat, that would be great, and hopefully will kind of get us all thinking a little bit more about it. And just to give you kind of some example, publications to keep an eye on in Massachusetts might include like the Patriot Ledger, Daily Hampshire Gazette, the Globe, Boston Herald, and Berkshire Eagle. For Connecticut folks and Connecticut publications, they could include the Hartford Courant, Connecticut Mirror, Connecticut News Junkie, or also local ones like the New Haven Register and Chronicle for people in Eastern Connecticut. So I'd encourage you to think about, what are the publications in your state, but also what are the local publications, especially if you're living in an area that is directly impacted by Project Maple. So that will be kind of the first thing that we're looking to do. And then the second thing is to choose a few main talking points that you want to use and to start writing our outlines. And so, like I said, Nisha and I will share a guide we put together shortly, and that will have some of those talking points that you can use. Okay, so actually, sorry, I'm gonna go back to this slide. Sorry, the slides are going ahead. But we're gonna take about 5 minutes now to search for an article and then drop it in the chat. So I'm gonna pause talking for a moment here. It looks like, oh, okay, yes, Nick posted something from the last discussion, which is super helpful. Laurel, it depends on your publication. So like Hartford Courant, for example, you're not able to read the article if you're not a subscriber. So you could also maybe think about ones that don't require you to be subscribers. I know Connecticut Mirror doesn't. But yeah, if you all want to take a couple minutes to do some Googling, you could go to a local news source, go to their website and search for some keywords and look at recent articles. Alternately, if you want to use Google and you want to use keywords, your state, maybe a newspaper name, that kind of thing could also work. Some terms that Nisha and I brainstormed ahead of time could include climate, environment, gas, pipelines, pollution, climate, fossil fuels, natural gas, your governor's name, methane, all of those things. But yeah, I'm gonna stop talking and give you all a minute to look for articles, and then we will start back in like 2 or 3 minutes. Amazing. It looks like Nisha just dropped in a bunch from the Boston Globe. I shared one from the Connecticut Mirror that came out recently about Trump and energy emergency that he declared and what that could mean for Connecticut and fossil fuel usage. It looks like Dennis found one in the Worcester Telegram. Okay, amazing. There's one from Alaska Public Media about Senator Murkowski and voting with Trump. But this week standing up against him. Okay, amazing. One from the Beacon Wind developer. Or about the Beacon Wind developer, sorry, from Newsday. Amazing. So these are all great examples, and yeah, I would encourage folks to keep looking and keep thinking about those. I'm gonna go ahead and reshare my screen just because I want to make sure that we have enough time to get through everything. All right, slideshow. Okay, so once we go into breakout rooms, the folks in there are gonna kind of can talk through all of this in more depth if you need, and specifically can help you with the talking points piece. But what we're gonna go ahead and do is share this letter to the editor guide in the chat. I think Nisha might have already done that. And what this guide does is it has some of the kind of like general what is a letter to the editor and like why is it important that Nisha just went through. But in addition to that, it has a bunch of talking points specifically for Project Maple. It includes general talking points about like what the project is, why it's bad, that kind of thing. It also includes state-specific talking points. So if you want to talk about why Project Maple is bad, and it goes against something specific in your state and like doesn't make sense from an emissions perspective, we generally have that information in there. And if there's something that you need that's not in there, feel free to reach out and we can help you find it. But there are a lot of points in there. So I would really, encourage you to look through that, to choose probably just a couple because letter to the editors are super short, and you don't want to kind of be so fact heavy that people get lost in it. But look through that, choose a couple, and think about how you kind of might weave that together in response to the article that you found. And so also when looking through those points, make sure that they're kind of specific ones that reference your article and that makes sense in supporting it. And sorry, I'm talking too much. But we're gonna go ahead and break us into breakout rooms for this. There will be a facilitator in each breakout room who is working on Project Maple and knows a lot about it. They can help answer questions that you might have and help you in choosing those points. But the idea is really to get started on an outline in the next about probably gonna give you like 12 minutes. And then we'll go ahead and bring everyone back to close and answer any final questions. And then hopefully you all will be ready to go out and finish your letter to the editor after that. But Sydney, if you...
Hi, before you go off into the groups, can we save these wonderful links that people are sharing in the chat? I don't know that we have the capacity to do that.
I'll make sure to save all of the links that are being dropped in the chat.
There were some interesting articles. Thanks.
Totally, yeah.
That's a great idea. Thank you, Gwen. I think in the follow-up email that Senna will send out, we'll share those links in the follow-up email. Thanks, Gwen. Sure. Amazing point.
Okay, cool. Sydney, are you ready to put people into breakouts? Yes, take your time. I hope you all had really good discussions in your breakout rooms. And yes, sorry to pull everyone back. I'm sure there could have been much lengthier discussions, but I just wanted to make sure that we kind of stayed on track and also have maybe a couple minutes at the end for questions. Also, just a reminder to please go ahead and mute yourself since I'm sure everyone is talking in the breakout rooms. I am going to reshare my slide one more time really quickly here. So I just want to really briefly share next steps before we close. But yeah, the first next step is to just finish drafting your letter to the editor. If you found an article that was recent and you want to draft your LTE, finish it and submit, that's amazing. If you're not really sure yet what article you want to respond to, you could kind of also wait for an article, keep an eye on publications, and then once you find one that you are excited to respond to, kind of tailor your LTE a little bit to that, and then go ahead and submit. I would just emphasize here that submitting your LTE in a timely manner is really important because if the article was published like a while ago, they likely will publish your letter. So just being kind of on top of that and making sure that you're submitting quickly is important. With that, if you want edits, or you're unsure about things, or yeah, whatever, anything like that, feel free to reach out to Nisha or I, or both of us, and we are happy to give you edits. And I think to that point about timeliness, like we'll try to turn around, at least for myself, I will definitely, happy to kind of be on top of that and turn those around quickly. But yeah, just kind of keeping an eye on the timeline of what stuff comes out. The other thing is we have a tracking document. So if you submit and get your LTE published, we would really love to know about it. We want to make sure that we're uplifting all of the media that Project Maple gets, and really just like kind of raising awareness about it. So please fill that out if you get your piece published. And then finally, we wanted to share an action that you all could do now, because in addition to the power of traditional media and sharing our opinion through that way, obviously social media has a really big influence as well. And so Nisha is going to go ahead and drop a post that the Stop Project Maple Instagram made a while ago, kind of just talking about what Project Maple is. And if you want to go ahead and jump on there and tag your governor, and then also share it, that would be really helpful. And to kind of the point about social media more broadly, once you get your letter to the editor published, it's really great to share it through those networks as well, whether they be on Facebook or Instagram or some other platform. But yeah, just sharing and uplifting as much as you can, tagging your governor, all of those things are really great. And so with that, I will just thank you all for joining. Nisha and I can both be contacted. We will send out a follow-up email. I'll send out a follow-up email. It will have the recording. It will have the links from the chat, like was mentioned earlier, the slides, the guide, all of that information, our emails, and really happy to keep chatting. But I think with that, I'll stop sharing. And if there are any questions in the next 2 minutes, we'd love to do that. And Martha, I know your hand went up, if you want to go ahead.
Just there was a good question in the chat. When do we expect Project Maple to be approved? But Project Maple per se has not been filed before FERC. That whole big proposal that we talked about, it was proposed at the end of 2023. But however, what's already happened is all those multiple little segments along it, which got approved under antiquated permits, are already being constructed or have completed construction. So 2 brand new M&R stations, and as well as that colossal expansion in Rhode Island, and all of that information's in the talking points, and Senna mentioned it as well. So they've accomplished that, doing those segments. But the larger project, they haven't yet submitted it, filed it before FERC. And so what that means is that if they submit it, that's when we kick into action and respond and do public comments. But they haven't done that yet. And we don't really know. There's been a rumor that the project, they may pull the proposal, but we have zero confirmation of that.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So trying to prove that we've got lots of public opposition before they do anything else, and hopefully make them second guess whether or not they want to move forward with this project. Are there any other quick questions? I can stay on for a couple minutes over 6, but just really appreciate everyone being here and taking your time out of a Thursday to join us for this and to help in opposing Project Maple. Okay. There are no other questions, and thank you all. I hope you have a great night. And yeah, we'll see you around.